Hello everyone, Dr. Mohon-Doyle here. As you begin your college career, you will need to understand the difference between reading for everyday purposes and reading for academic purposes, and you'll need to develop your critical reading skills. Thankfully, this class is designed to help you practice these skills. So what's the difference between reading for everyday purposes and reading for academic purposes? Well, there's three major differences: purpose, timing, and retention. Reading for everyday purposes is usually done for pleasure. This would include everything from reading a spy thriller at the airport to pass the time, to perusing the newspaper to learn what's happening in the world, to looking up instructions on how to start a vegetable garden. This type of reading takes place whenever you want to do it and rarely has specific deadlines for completion. Though if you're trying to figure out how to fix a leak, you probably want to get that done before your home floods. Retention of this information, that is, your ability to recall it on your own in the future, is not really that important. You may never need to explain the plot of your novel or what's happening in Europe to anyone else. With reading for academic purposes, however, you are reading specifically to gather information and comprehend the topic or theme of the text. This type of reading may include some of the same types of texts as everyday reading, such as novels or the news, but it's different in that there is usually a strict deadline for when you need to have the reading completed, and you need to ensure that you will fully understand important details from that reading because there will be some kind of assessment. This assessment may be a formal quiz or test or paper in college, or it could be answering questions during a job interview or while completing a work project. The type of reading that we do when reading for academic purposes is called critical reading. Critical reading requires you to actively engage with the text, whether that text is an article based in research or a work of fiction such as a novel. The first step to active engagement is comprehension. Do you understand the argument of the article or the theme of the novel? What point are they trying to make? What is the context in which this text was written, and how might it affect how the author writes? What details or subtle points have they included that might be important later? Are there vocabulary words that you aren't familiar with that you might need to look up? Once you understand what the author is saying, you should evaluate the quality of the text and the validity of their points. How is the text written? What is the style and tone? How do they support their points or themes, and is this support strong? Are there other perspectives that should be considered? Additionally, you should bring in your own opinions and ideas. What do you think? Do you agree with what the author is saying? Have they gotten you to question something you had previously thought or to consider a new viewpoint? Critical reading requires you to move beyond just taking in the text. It requires you to analyze and question the text to see how it works and how it can inform your knowledge of the topic it presents. There are several strategies you can employ to prepare to engage with the text before you even begin reading. The first is to determine your purpose. Why are you reading this text? What are you supposed to learn from it? This can help you focus on what details to pay attention to and how to approach the activity of reading. In English 1005, we may be reading a popular novel, but that doesn't mean I just want you to read something for fun. In fact, you may not like the novel I chose at all. Rather, you are reading a novel to practice identifying important details and themes in a longer work, to build your vocabulary and to improve your reading endurance. Additionally, in this class, you are going to read shorter articles that relate to the main text, though they are not directly about it. And since this is the case, one of your major goals will be to make connections between all of these texts. As you head into your major courses, these skills will be incredibly important, as your professors will likely assign longer, more complex readings. Before reading a text, it is also a good idea to consider the context. For example, who is the author and what do they normally write about? When was the text written and what was happening in the world at that time? Understanding the context may help you identify the major themes or argument. Identifying the genre of writing can also be useful for establishing expectations. If we're reading a scholarly article in the sciences, we expect to see an explanation of the research methods and the data collected. If we are reading a science fiction novel, we expect the story to be set in space or to include futuristic technology. If a text does not meet our expectations for the genre, it could mean that the text isn't very good, or that the author is trying something innovative. You also want to know your reading speed so you know how much time you need to give yourself to avoid feeling stressed. Recognize that your speed will change depending on the number of words on the page, your familiarity with the topic and the complexity of the vocabulary, and also on how you happen to be feeling that day. For this first week of class, it took me about an hour to complete the readings. However, I've read them before and I'm used to reading these types of texts, so it may take you longer, and that's okay. While we don't always have options, try to find a space where you can read comfortably with few interruptions. I know that if there are too many things going on around me, I'll get distracted, so I like to read in a quiet spot outside. Figure out what works best for you. Remember, critical reading is active reading, so you should be engaging with the text by making annotations on the page or taking notes. This could include marking passages that you found interesting or confusing, writing down questions that you have about the information, pointing out important details or plot points. I like to write my opinions about the text in the margins. This type of reading allows you to slow down and retain the information better than reading straight through. As you read, mark any vocabulary that you aren't familiar with. You can use context clues, that is the language that's around the word, to help you figure out what the word means, or you can just look it up. Write down the definition to help you remember it. Note any patterns or themes that may be important later in the text or that connect to ideas discussed in other texts you have read for this course. Once you've finished reading a text, try to write a brief summary of what you just read. See how much of this information you remembered and what you might need to go back and look at again. This is also a good time to write down any questions that you still have about the plot or major points that the author made. You can include these in your discussions to help start a conversation with the class. Discussing what you have read with other people who've read the same text can also be a really good strategy. See if you agree with what was said, unpack the major ideas, connect the information to your own experiences and knowledge. This gives you the opportunity to see new perspectives that could help increase your understanding and maybe enjoyment of the text. And finally, my last bit of advice is to read the text more than once. I know that this will not be popular advice, that we are all busy with work and family and other classes. However, rereading allows us to pick up on information that we might have missed the first time through because we were too busy just trying to understand what the text was about. If you have any questions about reading for academic purposes or critical reading, or you'd like to set up a Zoom conference with me, please contact me at my email address, mohondoylek@apsu.edu.